Welcome back to the Home Movie Legacy Project, showcasing compelling interviews with people who are telling their personal stories. Rhonda is all about preserving our visual heritage for generations to come before it's too late. So let's get back to the show. It's the Home Movie Legacy Project on the Rockstar Radio Network. And here again is your host, Rhonda Vigeant.
So I talked right into the break. I guess it's progress, not perfection. So those of you who are still listening in, as you can tell, I have a lot to say about this to the point where I don't even pay attention to my cues. But anyways, here we go with the second segment of the Home Movie Legacy Project with your host, Rhonda Vigeant. And right before the break, I started telling you a little bit about my company, Pro 8mm. And we are a company in Burbank, California that has been in business for 30 years. We have a very interesting history about how we've taken this home movie format that Kodak introduced in, I think it was 1963, to be the main way that consumers captured their families. It was the first real home movie format that was widely accepted by consumers because it was affordable. Unlike 16mm, that was a little bit more pricey and only a certain segment of the population could afford it. A little bit more with regular 8 film, but then now when Super 8 hit in the 60s, it was really something that almost every family who was interested in capturing their family memories started to purchase and use. And so with that, I'm going to take a moment and introduce my husband, my business partner, my life partner, Phil Vigeant. And before I do, Phil, I just want to say one thing. You know, you have an awesome bio that's on the page of my radio show, but the reality is, how does a spouse introduce, you know, their love of their life, their business partner, with such a formal bio? What you won't see on the bio is that not only are you my business partner and the husband of my 3 amazing children, but you're really my best friend. And one of the reasons I think we're going to have so much fun doing this show together is because we're constantly bantering ideas back and forth about, you know, how we can just be a better business and be a better service provider to our clients. And so welcome to Phil Vigeant, president of Pro 8mm in Burbank, California. Hi, Phil.
Hey, Rhonda.
Thank you for being my first guest on my show. I wouldn't have it any other way. And so, you know, as we get started here in the second segment, you know, why don't you just take a few minutes to tell a little bit of our newer audience and a refresher for our longtime listeners as we make the transition from the teleseminars about Pro 8mm, about how it evolved, and about how we got to be sort of so entrenched in this business of helping families save their legacies.
Well, Super 8 Sound, the company, was formulated around 1970 by a Harvard Film School teacher, Bob Doyle, who wanted to teach class using 8mm film rather than 16, so he could more cameras in more students' hands. So by using a less expensive film medium, he could have a much better class and could teach more and more kids about the filmmaking process. But to do so, he had to invent a few things because Super 8 was designed for amateur use. And Bob wanted to use it to teach professional filmmaking. So he had to kind of professionalize Super 8 in order to get across the points that were key to any individual who wanted to learn filmmaking. Part of it was sound, because at the time in 1970, Super 8 did not have any sound capacity. So he invented a sound system, a sound recorder called a full coat recorder. And that recorder allowed you to record audio while you did picturing. So with that tool and some editing equipment that he designed and a mixing system that he also designed, he could, reduce the studio system to a microcosm and had a complete system that you could make films using 8mm as the base kind of format.
So even back in the 70s, Bob sort of had this idea that Super 8 held tremendous potential as a production medium, correct?
Right. Yeah, and I think he saw it mostly for teaching, But sort of concurrent with him offering this sound system to big film schools like UCLA and USC, and most of the film schools around the country in the 70s had his system. People, independent filmmakers and professional filmmakers, started to see sort of a potential in actually using Super 8 film, this home movie format, to create actual professional work. So when I came along in the late 70s, I was in accounting school, and I got a part-time job working for Bob, doing the bookkeeping for the company. So it was my first accounting kind of position, and basically I was just after beer money. I just needed enough hours so I could go to the pub on Friday after studying, and I got kind of infatuated with the process, and I wound up working there during college, and I left and went on to a real job, and I just got kind of bored of the real world of accounting and wound up going back to Super 8 Sound in the late 70s, early 80s, as it was in this amazing kind of transition point. At that point, video had come into the market, and a lot of the applications for Super 8, like home movies, died out almost instantaneously.
Right, because that was an era when people were starting to buy VHS cameras, right? That was
Yes.
about, what year was that about?
Late 70s, early 80s.
Right, okay. So Super 8 was really losing its footing at that point as a home movie medium.
Yeah, 8mm film dominated home movies from the 30s.
Right.
Regular 8 came out in 1932 and was the preferred choice for people around the globe to shoot home kind of projects, home movies with the family, but also home things like, executives shot their office parties, and, there's a lot of documentation of life that's not strictly just the family on 8mm. But that history went from the 30s right up through the late 70s. And when video came along, it was just so much less expensive to originate pictures on videotape, because a 2-hour tape cost, $10, where that much film would have been hundreds of dollars. And so home movie people went to video by the droves. And by the early 80s, the entire market for Super 8 had collapsed.
Right. And so what were you going to do? I mean, here you are, owner of a company where not only are people not using Super 8 for home movies, their schools, I'm sure at this point, are starting to transition into digital video or VHS video. And so, I know about the evolution, and I think this would be an appropriate time to talk who was using Super 8 at this point.
Well, it was kind of, when I worked there for Bob, it was like it was going up, and every year they were selling twice as much stuff as they did the year before. And then between the time I left and I came back, it was about 3 or 4 years that the entire thing was completely changed.
Right.
And when I came back in, the whole thing had collapsed, and there was sort of nothing left to the concept of using 8mm film. And so I remember the things Bob taught me about, people learning, and I would answer the phone, and there were still people calling for this stuff,
right.
Even though it was clear to the general public that, this should go away.
So what was the thing that happened that sort of was the game changer at this point?
Independent people kept calling and arriving at the door looking for equipment, and they wanted to use it in a more creative, in a more professional kinds of project.
Right. So what would you say is the first, I know the answer to this, but I really wanted to get at this out before the break. What is the first project that came across Super 8 Sound's door that made you realize, okay, the school market, that's going away. The home movie market, that's going away. What next?
Well, we kind of muddled along for a couple of years, and then one customer got to do a commercial in New York City using Super 8, and it probably was done on a dare or a bet at that time, but it was for Barney's Clothing in New York. I remember it clearly. and they got some supermodel to star in this commercial. And when it ran in New York City, it was a huge hit, and it was, perceived very stylized. And this filmmaker, who, before that point was, arguing over the price of a single roll of film, is now got asked to do a commercial for Nike.
Okay.
And so he got a fairly good budget, and we put together a whole bunch of cameras for him to go out and shoot. And he shot John McEnroe, and they got the Beatles song Revolution as the soundtrack for the commercial. And they did it all in black and white and Super 8. And it wound up being a national commercial campaign, which was a tremendous success.
So the song Revolution became an evolution in Super 8.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to be going to commercial break in just a minute, so I want you to come back. When we come back, we'll talk more about that. But was that commercial a success?
Oh, my God. It was written up in every... I saw the press book one time. It was about 4 inches thick. Everyone from the New York Times to the LA Times, was touting it as the commercial that brought back black and white to television, and it was just an enormous success for Nike. And underlying in all this, which actually didn't go out in the press really that much, was the fact that it was done on Super 8 film.
Okay, and we'll hear more about that from Phil when we get back after the commercial. Stay tuned to the Home Movie Legacy Project. And in the next segment, we'll talk a little bit more about the evolution and the revolution of Super 8 and, how we've evolved to a place where it went from the home movie formats that you have in your shoeboxes to where it is today, and why we want to go back and get those old films out of your closet.
Raising the consciousness as to why home movies are so important. This is the Home Movie Legacy Project with Rhonda Vigeant, and we'll be back with more right after these on the Rockstar Radio Network.